Hey Jackalls! Today we'll take a look at a custom transition that you can make from an existing built-in transition in DaVinci Resolve 17, like the two you just saw. Now let's get digital. Now as you can see, the transitions can be extended or shortened. Now how you can make one is open the Effects tab, and in this example, the first one, this one was made with Wipe. Let's just look at it. By default, the wipe transition looks like this. And it's this one, the Foreground Wipe. By default it goes from left to right, and you can also invert it so it goes from right to left. And you also have some softness and border width. But I wanted to change this transition so that it goes from one side to the other and then back. Now how I can do that is when you have the transition on the clips, right click on it and open it in the Fusion page. Now in case you use one of these options, which are not Fusion transitions, let me just show you. If you right click on it, you won't have this option, so you have to first convert it to the Fusion cross dissolve, and then you can open it in the Fusion page. But for this one, I'll just give you the example of the one I used. So once you open the transition in the Fusion page, you'll most likely have a group like this that you can double click to expand, and to make it less hectic, you can right click on it and ungroup it. Now let me just tidy this a little bit so that we can see all of the nodes. So we have the media 1, we have the media 2. This null is actually a transform. As you can see, this is a transform and it has nothing else, which is basically the same as this node. They've just renamed it. Why this transition has a null transform, no idea, because this would be the same as if you did this. So this is basically the same. Then this transform increases this size, so you can adjust it if you want. Then the color corrector node affects this part of the image, which you can also change the color of, and it's what I did. But since I've basically hard keyframed it like this, but in my case this makes sense because at halfway point this already goes back, but in this case it doesn't make sense to do that. Then this is just a background called black, and it dissolves the channel boolean. If you don't use this, you can see what you get, so that's why you use that as a mask. And as you can see, it uses an expression, and as a modifier uses a transition. So we'll leave this node as is, and what uses this expression, it basically calls this node for the invert. So as you can see, currently it goes from left to right, but if you click invert here, the mask also inverts here. So now it will go from right to left. So we'll be using the same expression here, but we'll make some changes to the actual operation as we won't have the transition modifier. Now let's do the changes that I've made. I'll add a new node, dissolve, and I'll connect it here. Hold shift to get an automatic connection and release the mouse button. And then the second thing that will connect to this dissolve is the media in 1. So I'll connect it like this. Put this media in node here. Now let's take a look what the dissolve node does. So we have the media in 2 on the left, and this is the media in 1. And the dissolve node is displayed on the right. And basically, if we have the dissolve operation, it switches between the background and the foreground. You can do this automatically, and it can switch instantly from 0 to 1 with nothing in between, or you can have it go like this slowly and it will basically fade. And to do that automatically, we'll make an expression. You can type in equals here to get an expression, or right click on the name and click expression. You can now put in an expression. In this case we'll use this one. So what this expression does is it asks a question and it does something. So the question that it asks, if the last frame, which is com.renderEnd, in this case it's frame 23, minus time is the current frame, so currently we're at frame 0, then we're at frame 10 and so on. So if this difference at the first frame, which is frame 0, this value is 23, if that value is less than last frame divided by 2. If this expression is true, which means the first value is less than this value, then we have 1, as you can see. But if it's false, which means this expression is bigger, then we have 0. And we can simply drag the mouse over the timeline and you'll see this instantly switch at the midpoint, which is right here. Now when it switches, it bugs out. As you can see, it doesn't replace the values. So you have to select another node and select the dissolve node again to get this back and see the switch happen instantly again. At least it should have, but I guess it doesn't update for some reason. But in this case, with this expression, it happens at the midpoint of the transition. So you can basically extend or shorten the transition, and it will always happen at the midpoint of the transition. So if we take a look at the difference what this dissolve node achieved, we basically have this overlaid all the way till the end. But with this, with the dissolve node added, so with the dissolve node, what we did is we now have this current clip visible, and what we'll need to do is make it go all the way till the end at the midpoint and then switch to this. So this will now go from the right side, and this clip will also be visible from the right side, not the left side. And that will do with these two dissolve nodes. Now, as you can see, the background and foreground is currently set to 0 at the beginning and 1 at the end. And because we want to have something different, we'll have to make an expression so that it switches at the midpoint. So make an expression and we can get rid of the keyframe. So the expression that we'll be using is this one. It is similar to this one, except here we used 0, but in this case we'll be using a whole expression. So we need 1 because when everything is zeroed out, we need 1. And then we just basically calculate how this should behave to the half point. And then in this dissolve, we'll use also an expression, and it is similar to the first one, except now we have to switch the comparator end and the time. In the first one, the comparator end is in the beginning, in the front, and we subtract the time, but this time we use the time first and subtract the comparator end. Now, do we have any difference? We do, but it's not what we want. So select the dissolves, right click on the background and remove the enquiries because we don't need them. And do the same with this dissolve if you still have it. So let's see what we got. Not what I wanted. Let me check. So the expression is actually not whole. So it's this one. Let's see what we have. And that fixed it. Look at that. Almost fixed it. What's the issue? Well, the issue is we don't have the same clip as the one below. And to fix that, we'll simply click on this dissolve and Ctrl T to switch between the inputs. Now we should get what we want. Perfect. So this transition is done, and admittedly it was more technical with all the expressions, and now for the easy one. And the easy transition was WAVINESS, and believe it or not, it was made from warp, which looks like this. So if we go to warp, it has a couple of nodes, 2 media ins, fast noise, and 3 vertex nodes, a dissolve node and a zoom. So let's select the vertex node and take a look what it does. It does that. The second one, and the fast noise, what does it do? It's static. So basically what you can do is use any effect instead of the vertex. In my case, I've used waviness. So I'll simply connect it like that. Now I've made some adjustments, but as you can see you have scale and strength. Now the easiest way to make changes is to simply adjust the scale and the strength to what you want. Maybe even animate it over time if that's what you want. You could also right click and modify that with anim curves so that it adjusts over a transition, and you can also adjust the scale here or the offset. I won't be doing that. As you might imagine, I'll be doing this with expressions. So I'll make an expression for the scale and I'll make an expression for the strength. So for the scale, I'll use this expression with the value of 30 everywhere this number appears, and for the strength, I'll use the same expression, except I'll replace the values with 100. So let's see what we have. Cool, as you can see this is totally automatic, as it does change over time. So at midpoint it gets all crazy and then it tones down again. So now I can simply copy this node to the bottom one. So let me copy it, connect it to here, just like that. And instead of this one, we can just use a normal waviness node with default values. But you can also change it, and you can also change the type if you want, but I'll simply leave it to default. Now currently, these values are static, as I've just put 30 and 100 inside. But we can also make this dynamic so that you can change it in the edit page. How you can do that? Well, I'll simply use this node, right click on it, go to edit controls, and we'll add some new controls. In this case, I just want to add them to the control tab. So I'll use the control page. This will be a number. So let's say I want to use scale and I'll give it a different name. So I'll give it a name of scale value. I want this to be a slider just like this. So I'll use a slider. Steps will go by 1. So if I put here 5, this would be 0, 5, 10 and so on. But I'll put it at 1. So you can go 0, 1, 2, 3 and so on. Do I want to be an integer, so this means a full value? It could be. I won't set any default values, but range could be from 0 to, let's say, 100. And if you don't want this to be any other value, you can also specify the allowed values here. If you don't, the user can then override these two values that you put here. So I'll put OK. Now we have a scale value that goes from 0 to 100. And if I want to use, let's say, minus 100, it doesn't allow me because I've set it so. And I'll do this one more time for strength control. So edit controls, number control. Maybe instead of strength value, I should specify waviness strength. Again, from 0 to 100. I'll just leave it as is, so no values. Step 1, just like that. And as you can see, it goes from 0 to 100, but now I can use minus 100. And I can even use more, so like 200. And this now changes, but this one doesn't. Now in both cases 0 is the default value, but I could change this when I made these values. So now I'll set this as 15, which is what the waviness has a default, and the scale is at 30, and let's see what we'll have. Now currently nothing will obviously show up, because this expression doesn't actually use these two values. How do you know how to get these two values? Well, the easiest way to do it would be to maybe make an expression in the speed node and connect the plus to here. So this is just scale value and waviness strength, but this is only for this node. If you want to use this expression in other nodes, let's see, I'll go to zoom maybe, so I can apply this to aspect. And this is now called waviness 1, because this is the name of the node, dot scale value. And the strength is waviness 1, the name of the node, dot waviness strength, which is again the name of this property. So now, wherever we have 30 in this example, we'll use scale value. So in my case, I'll just copy that inside. And the bottom one, because this is the strength, it should have waviness strength. So now as you can see, it's the same as before. Well, almost. If I set the values to 0, you can see that we have nothing. I can set this to maximum value. And as you can see, we do have something different. Now use the same expressions in this node, except don't use scale value and waviness strength. So for the scale, it would be waviness 1 dot scale value, and for strength, it would be waviness 1 dot waviness strength. But that is only if you need a different node. Otherwise, you can simply delete it, make a copy of this one, and paste it right here by holding Shift and release the mouse button to make a connection. So now the only thing that's left to do is to check how it looks like. Now if you look at the transition, it looks like this. If you select it, you can now right click and create a transition preset, give it a name and save it. And it will show up in the transitions. Now if you save the transition preset like this, as you can see, you don't have the waviness strength and the scale that we have specified, and you also won't be able to share this transition. But you will have access to it in DaVinci Resolve. So if you want to share it with other people, you have to create a macro. So I'll select the first node because I want to use these two values. If I would select it like this, it would just mean that waviness would be somewhere down the list. So I want to have the waviness 1 at the top. And I'll select all of the other nodes. It doesn't matter in what order if you don't want to make any other changes. Also don't select the media ins and the media out. Then right click on the last node, go to macro make one. As you can see, the waviness 1 is at the top because I've selected first. In the controls, I want to be able to change these two values. As you can see here, we have the default and it uses the values that we currently have. So the default could be 30 and 15. So this can be the default, and we have the minimum and the maximum range, which is fine. And that's basically all the changes that we want to be able to make in this transition. So now go to Save as Group. If you use the Save As option, all of these nodes will be merged into one and you won't be able to open them. So if you want to access these nodes in other projects, just use Save as Group, go to Fusion, Templates, Edit. This will be obviously a transition, so go to the transition, give it a name. I already have 3 transitions here, as you can see, waviness, and this is the one I'll be using. So just save it, and once it's saved, you can close it and go back into the edit page. So now if I use the waviness tutorial, which was the last one that I've done, it's like this. Now this should be a group. As you can see, I had to double click to get the waviness and the scale. In the example that I've just given, the default value of the strength would be 15, which would be something like this, which may not be a lot. So in this case, I have the scale set to 30 by default and the waviness strength to 100. And now if I go to the effect, which you can also go here, or right click and go into Open in Fusion page, you can see that we have a group and we can open it just like with previous examples. If you used Save As, you wouldn't be able to open this tool. It would be just one node that you can't open. And if you select the media in 1 and 2, so you would have a media in 1, media in 2, and 2 more media ins connected to the actual tool. So that's why you don't select the media ins when you make the macro for the transitions. Now in this macro, as you can see, I do have something enabled, but it bugs out. Don't know why. Let's see if it works in this one. It also doesn't. So I'll just try it here, and this one is, let's say I named it twice, so I can invert it, but at some point this option bugs out and it doesn't show again. But in this case I didn't export the color corrector to make the adjustment for the color transition. But just to show you, I've saved as a group, but in this case I had the media in selected, and you have something like this, and when you open it, you have the media in 1 and the media in 2 inside the group. So it's something similar as before, but these two are not needed. And as you can see, this null is actually also not needed because it gives the same result. Now, one thing that I didn't export in this example, which the original has, is the border and the softness, which you can also export if you want to. And that's one way how you can do custom transitions with a bit of math magic. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you want to see DaVinci Resolve and video editing content twice a week, and hit the bell notification icon so don't miss my next video. I'm Simon, and until next time, Jackalls, keep it digital.